Yo, what's going on, guys? CultOfMush back at it with another video. This is a $750 gaming PC build. If you're looking to game at 1080p on all the latest games, get good settings and really good frame rates, we're talking 50 to 60 frames per second on all the latest games at really good settings, then definitely give this build a look, and I think that $700 to $750 mark is what a lot of you guys are looking for. So without further ado, let's get right into this with the CPU of the build. I went with the Intel Core i5-4460 3.2 GHz quad-core processor. This is a CPU that I've recommended a number of times, and that's because in a lot of these budget builds with these $600 to $800 builds, you really can't fit a K-series processor in there like the 4690K. And you definitely can't fit in something like an i5-6600K, which is the new Skylake CPUs. So the i5-4460 is the next best option at $175. Yes, you won't be able to overclock on the CPU, but that also means you're saving some money because you can just use the packed-in stock cooler. And nonetheless, it is stocked at 3.2 GHz, so that's still fairly decent, and gaming performance isn't really going to be impacted too much on the basis that you can't overclock this CPU. Like I said, it's still at 3.2 GHz, and over the i5-4690K, you're saving around $50 to $60, and that can be put towards your video card, which is the most important part of a build, especially in these budget-end builds. And then when you look at the 6600K, those CPUs are really expensive right now, so obviously something like that's not going to be in the build. The i5-4460 is a really good CPU. The only thing that it's really limited at is if you're trying to play something like the Wii emulator or the PS2 emulator, because for those emulators, you really want a CPU that's clocked in at around 4 to 4.2 GHz. But regardless, for most of you, that probably isn't even a big issue. For the motherboard, I went with the Gigabyte GA-H97M-D3H Micro ATX LJ1150 motherboard. Now, this is a Micro ATX motherboard, but that's not a big deal considering this is a budget build. And for the price of $84, you're still getting a lot of great features. It's got 4 RAM slots up to DDR3 1600MHz, up to 32GB of RAM supported. It's got RAID support, 6 SATA 60-bit per second ports, and onboard USB 3 headers. The only real knock with this motherboard is the not so great black and yellow color scheme, but some of you guys might like it, it's just a personal opinion of mine. But that also isn't a big deal since the case we went with doesn't have a side window, so color scheme really isn't going to come into play. So this is a really well reviewed motherboard from Gigabyte. It's not going to break the bank, but it still has all the features you need, which is the kind of motherboard you want to go for in a budget build. Moving on to memory, we went with G.Skill Ripjaws Series 8GB, 24GB sticks running at DDR3 1600MHz, $33 for this kit of RAM. Just absolutely insane. I really haven't seen 8GB of RAM go any lower than $30, and really if you are looking to get it less than $33, it's like, come on man, $33 for 8GB of RAM is a killer deal. Just a year ago, people were spending twice as much for the same kit of RAM, so pick this up. It's 8GB of RAM, which is a perfect amount for any gaming build, even with the games that recommend 16GB of RAM. For most of them, you don't even need that much. I've mentioned it before, but Star Wars Battlefront is a game that does recommend 16GB of RAM. I have 8GB in my machine, and I had no problem running that game whatsoever. So $33 for a really high quality kit of RAM from G.Skill is just a no-brainer, absolutely sick deal. For storage, I went with the Western Digital Caviar Blue 1TB 3.5-inch 7200 RPM hard drive. Now yes, this is a mechanical hard drive. I couldn't fit an SSD in this build. If you guys want to scrap the mechanical hard drive and get like a 120GB or maybe even a 240GB SSD, then by all means do that, but I think for gamers, you do want the mass storage that you can get out of a mechanical drive for a relatively cheap price of $50. You know, if you're buying a lot of games on Steam during the Steam sales and you want to have them downloaded all at once, then that 120GB or even 240GB that you're going to get from an SSD just isn't enough. And at a $750 budget, it's still really hard to fit in an SSD without sacrificing in other areas that will hamper the performance of the build. So I just think get a mechanical hard drive for now. A Caviar Blue is so cheap at around $48 to $50. And they're still pretty reliable for a mechanical drive, but in the future when SSD prices go even lower, definitely pick one up, it's something nice to have. But for now, in a budget build, you should get by no problem with the Caviar Blue 1TB. Moving on to the video card now, I'm just gonna say you can go two ways with this. You could either pick up the EVGA GeForce GTX 970 4GB. This is the one with the ACX cooler for $310, and right now you also get a free copy of Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is pretty nice. That game, when it was released on Xbox One, got stellar reviews, but nobody played it because it was an Xbox One exclusive and it came out on the same day as Fallout 4. But now it's coming to PC and you get it absolutely free with the GTX 970, which is a great video card. I have one myself, The video card really shines at 1080p gaming. If you're looking to do 1440p gaming, it's really not going to happen with the newer games at the highest settings. But with games that are coming out, like I said, Rise of the Tomb Raider, upcoming games like Mirror's Edge Catalyst, Street Fighter V, all of those will run no problem 1080p. You'll be able to max out most of them, and there will be a game or two here that you will have to turn down a setting or two if you want a consistent 60 FPS. But for the most part, the GTX 970 is going to give you a great experience at 1080p gaming. Now, obviously, you can also go with the R9 390, that's from AMD. I like the ones from MSI myself. It seems like a lot of my subscribers do prefer NVIDIA video cards, that's why I have the GTX 970 on here. But really what it ends up becoming is a pissing war. Both GPUs are very good. The R9 390 does outperform the GTX 970 by a bit. The GTX 970 is more power efficient, and like I said, you do get that free copy of Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is going to mean something to some of you guys. So really, whatever route you do go with, you're not going to go wrong. If you are looking to game at 1440p, that's where I would definitely pick up the R9 390 over the GTX 970. It's just going to be better at that resolution. But for 1080p gaming, the GTX 970 is really great. You get a free game. It's $310, just a really good option for 1080p gaming. For the power supply, I went with the SeaSonic S12 520 watt 80 plus bronze certified power supply. Now, right off the bat, you guys might think, holy shit, 520 watts is not enough. But if you guys do go with the GTX 970, like I said, that GPU is super power efficient. You can actually get by with like a 450 watt power supply with that GPU. Obviously, that wouldn't be the safest thing in the world, but I digress. This 520 watt power supply is going to be just fine. I actually have a buddy that uses a GTX 970 and he only has a 500 watt power supply. And considering you can get this PSU for only $55, it's just a very cheap fit-in for the build. And the fact that in a budget end build like this, you're not going to be going for a Crossfire SLI configuration, so getting a 700 or 800 watt power supply doesn't make any sense either. This 520 watt power supply from SeaSonic is very well reviewed, and SeaSonic has a very good track record with all of their power supplies, so this is going to be a great addition to the build. For the case, I went with the Corsair 100R. This is an ATX mid-tower case for $48. If you guys have around $15 extra, you can pick up the NZXT S340. I've been an advocate of that case for a while now. But if we went with that, we would have gone over our budget slightly. So I just went with the Corsair 100R. This is a very basic $50 case. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but I really like the simplistic aesthetics to it. And the interior is great for a budget end build with a lot of options for cable management and just a lot of room for ventilation and other future upgrades. And for the price tag of $48, you really can't go wrong with a very cheap case. And Corsair has a great track record with all of their cases. I have a Corsair case myself, the half 912. That's also a fantastic case if you guys want to go with that. I think the 100R is just a slightly better option right now for only $48. That's a pretty damn good deal. So that's going to wrap up this video, guys. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. If you dislike, hit the dislike button. Comment your thoughts and requests for future videos down below. I always love reading those. And as always, guys, have a great day, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.